I don't know why I sometimes assume that Kubo's gonna take a break from trying to utterly shatter my mind. Like, yeah, sometimes he does for a bit, right? But he usually does that to lull me into a false sense of security. But other times, he'll throw more at me immediately after I think I'm done. Like, the whole crazy initial Aizen betrayal was almost immediately followed up by the massive Isshin reveal, or the crazy twist of Tsukishima's power in the Fullbringer arc was immediately followed by the Ginjo smirk. You know the one. But this Thousand Year Blood War is mostly pretty relentless when it comes to these shocking twists and big revelations. I mean, maybe it's because it's the final arc, so we don't have time to not unveil the things that Kubo's been saving, but damn, are these all hitting. We go from the Quincy's survival to the sudden invasion to Ichigo learning his mom is a Quincy to the Unohana twist to the everything but the rain lore, and now we get an answer to a question that I didn't even know was being asked. A twist that's been secretly in plain sight for most of the series, and once again, I am not okay. What? I can't even get my finger placement right. Holy shit. This one was right in front of me. I should have seen it, I should have realized, but as usual, I didn't. So let's talk about it. After Ichigo finally learned about his parents and his past and all of the craziness surrounding that I talked about for like an hour last video, it turns out, as I expected, this is what Uetsu no Maya wanted Ichigo to do, and now that Ichigo has this information, now that he knows his roots and where he really came from, he can come back to the Soul Society to finish what he started, to continue his training with Squad Zero. But before we get deep into that, let's first just talk about what other people are up to. Ichigo isn't the only one getting back to training, and he's not the only one going about things in a new way. We get some glimpses of some other Soul Reapers doing what they can to prepare for whatever they have to face next in this war, and dealing with their recent defeat. The captains who had their Bankais stolen are seemingly trying to find new ways to work around that, to not just cope, but to find ways to account for what they lost. I really love this initiative because there needed to be heavy and varied reactions to what happened to them. They all lost parts of themselves, the most powerful parts of themselves, but maybe they'll be able to find new aspects within their own power and new perspectives, so it's really great stuff to have this be the angle for these characters. Captain Hitsugaya tries a back-to-basics approach since he won't be able to rely on his Bankai, so it seems like he wants to be able to refine his other skills instead. I'm curious to see how he'll use this in combat, but it seems like the type of training that Goku would suggest, you know? To find new ways to use the power that you have instead of worrying about the power you lost, and that maybe you used as a bit of a crutch before. Although, admittedly, I'm a little sad that we didn't get to see the true Bankai that he talks about here. Apparently, he got his Bankai to a further evolution after the Aizen fight. If I stabbed my friend through the chest, I'd probably spend all my time making my Bankai better too. Maybe we'll get to see that true Bankai if the Quincy that stole it uses it, but maybe he wouldn't be able to, I don't know. I'm not really sure yet if the Quincy's can access the full potential of the powers they took. I kind of doubt it, since it's such a personal thing for the Soul Reapers. It's kind of the Captain Ginyu thing of having the power but maybe not knowing how to really use it. Anyway, that was an interesting tease, and I'd be curious to see what he did with his Bankai if we ever get the chance to. Captain Komamura's journey after losing his Bankai takes us into some new information about him as he goes back to the elder of his clan and wants to know their clan's secret power. I've always wanted to know more about his appearance, and it seems like we're getting a bit of an opportunity to do that because the elder is this massive dog in a cave. And those that have kept up with my channel or my Q&As or my Patreon probably know that I'm a big dog guy. We have a Saint Bernard, so I love seeing big fluffy dogs like this one. But my dog Yogi has never spoken to me like this. He brings up Komamura hiding his appearance under that basket earlier in the series, and I love that this is being touched on. His involuntary unmasking was a big moment back then, but it seems like something that he's come to terms with since he's never put it back on, but that's not good enough for this elder, even though Komamura is saying a lot of interesting things about their clan being able to assimilate and to be able to live with the rest of society soon. which was really fascinating, and I can't wait to learn more about why these people are like ostracized and why they look different. So I can't wait to learn more, but they seem to be very isolationist, not really caring about the rest of the world. But unfortunately, the Elder isn't buying the idea of progress, so it seems like it's gonna be a real test finding that clan secret, since he doesn't want to just give it up to someone that he views as kind of a traitor in a way, or kind of someone that's dishonorable. I'm not sure what the clan secret could actually be, like maybe it's like an advanced bestial form like the Mink tribe in One Piece or something, like a legitimate beast mode, I don't know. Soifone, meanwhile, is dealing with losing her Bankai with the classic Vegeta training method, going out into the middle of a rocky wasteland to be pissed off and struggle by herself. I feel for her though. She always seemed so happy when she was launching her missile. But in all seriousness, I hope she finds what works for her. I would honestly love if her old captain helped her through and to revisit that relationship, so fingers crossed for that. But yeah, she's not even letting Omaida help or train with her. He's just off with his family. And some other people are prepping too, people that haven't lost their Bankai but obviously don't want to have to put those Bankai at risk when the next battle does come. They know what they're up against now, and they know that Bankai won't be enough. It was also really interesting seeing Hisagi training with Kensei, considering what we saw in Turn Back the Pendulum, where Kensei was shown to be like a personal hero to child Hisagi and was the reason that Hisagi has his tattoo. It's pretty fitting that he's his captain now after Kensei came back to the position in Squad 9, after having his spot taken by one of the people responsible for having him be gone for 100 years. There's even an interesting moment here when Kensei kind of badmouths Tozen's style, and Hisagi got mad hearing him speak poorly of his former captain. It's really tragic to see Hisagi still feel that bit of loyalty to Tozen after everything that happened, and even after he had to be the one to deal one of the finishing blows. But I think it speaks to how deep those relationships were. Just because they were traitors didn't mean that they still aren't mourned, you know? A bit of an aside, but I loved seeing a little bit more of the Visor. I honestly wish that we were seeing more of them than we have been seeing. Turn Back the Pendulum especially endeared me to them, and I would have loved to have seen more of them reacclimating to being in the Soul Society and taking up their old positions. I'm sure there were a lot of mixed feelings there that needed to be worked out, but unfortunately, because of the time jump after the Irankar arc, we didn't really get a chance to see that transitional period for them. The next time we saw them, some of them were already back to their positions as captains, and it's really cool to see that, and I really like that direction. But it would have been interesting to see that shift back, you know, and the conversations that happened around that. They've just always been great characters, and there's a lot of potential and interesting ideas with them. So I just want a bit more from them after they shined so brightly against Aizen. One of the preparations I'm most curious about is not really training in the traditional sense, but I'm sure it'll be an improvement all the same. I'm talking about Mayori, because he's locked himself and Nemu in his lab and is keeping everyone out and not letting anyone see what he's working on. Naturally, I'm so excited to see whatever it is, and I'm sure it could be ingenious or disturbing or both, and I can't wait to see what he's cooking up. We didn't see him fight during the first invasions, so I assume he was just spending his time analyzing the enemies, and now maybe he can apply that to whatever he's making. That's a very Mayori thing to do, you know, find a weakness and then exploit it with some crazy invention. But considering his ties to the Quincy, I'm sure it's going to be pretty interesting whatever direction he goes with it. And I'm also still fully holding on to my Nemu is created from Quincy experiments theory, by the way. I'm not letting that go quite yet. I still think it's possible and would be interesting, and it could happen. The reason I wanted to talk about these other people first is mainly because for the rest of this video, it's going to be all about our boy Ichigo. It has to be, because we got a whole lot of insight into his inner self, his progression, and how he's going to move forward. We're about to get very personal as he takes some huge leaps, but as always, Kubo had a massive surprise in store in the middle of all of this, and like I said, I am not okay. Ichigo returns to the test that he failed before, but finds a very different result this time. And I absolutely loved the visual of him finding his Asauchi among the crowd, and how instead of all attacking him, they part and bow before him as he calmly walks by. It was a perfect physical representation of Ichigo no longer being at war within himself, lost and beaten down in the dark, and instead he's now able to see clearly now that he has a better understanding of where he's from and who and what he really is. It was beautiful, and the moment he found his Asauchi and took its hand was so hype. Interestingly, his Asauchi is all white with the face of a hollow, looking very similar to Ichigo's inner hollow and his mask, but more on that in a bit. Ichigo being able to do this now was what made him pass this test and not fail this time, as he's taken to Nemaya's forge beneath his palace. I liked the scope of this place. Despite it being enclosed, it felt grand, but simple at the same time, a lot like the palace above. Nemaya, with the help of his bodyguard assistants, begins work on reforging Ichigo's Bankai, and the whole thing was really fun, and his bodyguards were fun too, as they all got to work in different ways. And it was nice to see Nemaya get a little serious once he got working and his shades were off, now in his element, forging a Bankai, while still also being a showman, you know, that never quite leaves him. And this is where we get to the big stuff that we need to talk about. As Nemaya's working and speaking to Ichigo about his Bankai, his Zanpakuto, his Asauchi, and the fact that Ichigo's inner hollow that has been inside him this whole time, that we've contended with this whole time, is actually his true Zanpakuto, is actually Zangetsu. After what we learned in Everything But the Rain, White infected Misaki, and that infection, that hollow power, passed on to her child too, where that power apparently melded and combined with the Soul Reaper powers within Ichigo from being the son of a Soul Reaper. All of it mixing together and becoming kind of inseparable, you know, kind of congealing into one power. So the Soul Reaper side and the hollow side were actually kind of the same thing the whole time, which makes sense from White Ichigo's design. You know, he looks the most like Ichigo. He looks practically identical to Ichigo, and he's got Soul Reaper robes, and he's got his own sword, and it's been there visually the whole time that this power was more similar to Ichigo than anything else, hinting at this reveal that the Hollow side and the Soul Reaper side were actually one and the same the whole time. So the spirit of his Zanpakuto was the inner Hollow, and it immediately made me think back to the inner Hollow calling himself Zangetsu way back, saying I am Zangetsu over and over, because it turns out he is, and he always was. The story led Ichigo and me as the reader to believe that there was the spirit of Ichigo's Zanpakuto, the old man Zangetsu, and there was also the hollow power within him, and that these were two entirely separate things vying for control over him. Ichigo and I didn't know it, but the White Ichigo was the actual personification of his Soul Reaper powers. So the question that obviously springs to mind after learning this is, wasn't the personification of Zangetsu within Ichigo the dark-haired guy in the cloak that was always hanging around, you know, the one that we were introduced to as being Ichigo's Zanpakuto? That's the question. And the answer... oh god, okay. Let's really get into it. So it turns out that that man that Ichigo would speak to, the one that he called Zangetsu, wasn't actually Zangetsu. He never was, and he wasn't the manifestation of his Soul Reaper powers either. No, that being was only pretending to be the avatar of Ichigo's Soul Reaper side, because it turns out that he's actually the manifestation of Ichigo's Quincy powers that have been inside him this whole time, and oh yeah, the guy we thought was Zangetsu is actually kind of, sort of, but also not exactly Yuabaha, because his appearance looks like Yuabaha from 1,000 years ago. He does look like him! I didn't even think of that! I should have freaking noticed that, especially because sometimes he's drawn with like a thinner mustache, and that's like, what the shit? What the shit? What? Old man Zangetsu is in a way Yuabaha. He looks like Yuabaha. He's identical to what Yuabaha used to look like, and that's always been the case. And it was right in front of us this whole time. The final villain of Bleach was right in front of us this whole time. We didn't even know. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Completely caught me off guard, and then it seemed so obvious looking back. I can't believe I didn't notice the resemblance sooner, because they do look very similar with only a few small cosmetic differences. I don't know if it was the lack of mustache or the fact that fake Zangetsu had glasses on or what, but it completely blew my mind when I realized that I've been looking at Yuabaha this whole time and didn't notice. Like, he even had that kind of shadow thing going on sometimes too, like he visually looked like how the Quincy's look. And I can't believe that when I met Yuabaha for the first time, I didn't make the connection that there could actually be something there. It actually makes so much sense though, especially after what we've learned about Yuabaha recently. In Everything But the Rain, we learned that he isn't just the king of the Quincy, but he was the creator of the Quincy, and it's his power that's coursing through all of their veins and through Ichigo's veins, so that Quincy power has been in there, sharing that space with Ichigo's Soul Reaper and Hollow powers this whole time, from the moment Ichigo was born, was inherited. I was reminded once again that my wife sort of clocked this unintentionally when she was looking at Zangetsu's design.
Is he a bad guy?
No.
Not yet. Just you wait.
You think he's gonna be a bad guy?
Gonna be a bad guy.
You think so?
Yeah.
That's actually really alarming.
Yeah. Sorry.
He's Ichigo's sword. He's like the spirit of his sword. So him potentially being bad would be quite
Hate to break it to you.
I don't know if she's a prophet. She very well could be after this and the Unohana talk. Like, she had a feeling that Zangetsu was going to be a villain. And he's not really, but that's pretty darn close. It's not like Old Man Zangetsu is actually Yuabaha himself, but he also kind of is. But more so that he's the Quincy powers being personified in that image. And that really helps solidify the inherent connection between Yuabaha and the other Quincy's. We know that Quincy powers came from him and that he has ways of taking that power back, like he did with Masaki. We don't really know the specifics, but a piece of Yuabaha lives within every Quincy, it seems. Like, part of his soul is a part of their souls, and that's what gives them their power. In all of the Quincy's inner worlds, I imagine they have all seen this man from 1,000 years ago. I did initially question that they say Old Man Zangetsu is how Yuabaha looked a millennia ago, because at least in the anime, we saw what he looked like back then during his final battle with Yamamoto and the original 13, and he didn't look like this. I thought it could just be an oversight at first, but then I learned that they actually altered this in future releases after this was revealed, so I guess it was to hide this revelation. So that's really cool. Apparently the version they have on Hulu is the original version, because mine had a mustache, but on Blu-ray releases, he does indeed look a bit more like Old Man Zangetsu. That's a cool detail. I like that a lot. If I had seen him looking like that, I definitely might have made the connection. So good on them for keeping that hidden. But yeah, this is kind of groundbreaking and story shattering, but not in a bad way. It's just, once again, Kubo is making me completely recontextualize everything and shattering my mind and shattering Ichigo's mind, because I loved how it starts to rain in the mindscape once Ichigo hears this, and it progresses from rainfall to the whole place crumbling and flooding. Once again, a great display of showing what Ichigo's going through in his mind after learning yet another difficult truth that he has to accept. Only this one must feel extremely personal, because he had something inside of him that was not what he thought it was, that was actively lying to him, and it wasn't even the thing inside of him that he thought was working against him. It's like your own blood keeping secrets from you. It's gotta feel so unnerving knowing that there's something inside of you that's been conspiring against you, that's been holding back your true power and keeping hidden things that you should know about yourself. This whole reveal is just crazy, and obviously is another one that makes you look back and want to examine all of the Old Man Zangetsu scenes that have happened. So that's exactly what I did, and I found some interesting things that really makes this feel so fulfilling. way back, earlier into Bleach, when Ichigo first asks the man he meets in his inner world his name. The name is blacked out when Old Man Zangetsu tries to say it. At the time, it was like, oh, he just can't hear him say it because he's not ready yet. And maybe that was Kubo's original intention, or maybe he had this planned, knowing that the man in front of us wasn't who Ichigo thought he was. That the name he would give isn't actually the name that Ichigo needed to hear. Like, did he say Yuabaha here, and Ichigo just couldn't hear it? If he did, why was it blocked out and scrambled? And if Ichigo had heard that name, if he had heard him say, I'm Yuabaha, would that have unlocked his Quincy powers earlier? Connected him to the king, you know? Maybe? I don't know, but that thought definitely crossed my mind because his Quincy powers were apparently always there, but dormant until recently, after he has seen Yuabaha, and he talks about feeling a familiarity when he first faced Yuabaha, how he felt drawn to him, how he felt like he knew him, he was familiar. It was only after he saw Yuabaha, you know, his blute happened. I guess technically his Quincy powers came to him when he was destroying the jail, and maybe seeing Yuabaha in person and feeling that familiarity to what he thought was Old Man Zangetsu helped unlock his Quincy powers even further. I'm just curious about this scene. I assume he didn't say my name's Zangetsu, but he could have lied. He does say that the only lie he ever told was his name, so I don't know. That scene is just interesting now looking back, especially with all this extra Quincy stuff on top of it. Something else that he pointed out, and that going back you definitely noticed, was that Old Man Zangetsu didn't personally handle most of the training, and reminded Ichigo that most of that was with the help of White. And he's right about that. It wasn't Old Man Zangetsu swinging his sword around against Ichigo and battling him. It was always White. Even during the training for the final Getsuga, the young version, who I guess is what Yuabaha looked like when he was even younger, didn't really get too heavily into the mix until he merged with White, and then they fought with Ichigo. It's just interesting because he brings up that the Hollow was the one inside of Ichigo that kept saving him. And when you look back, the times when Ichigo's mask would consume him and take over were usually times when he was being threatened, where it was protecting him, and where it was really where a lot of his power was coming from. The only time I can think of where he really relied on Old Man Zangetsu was during the fight with Kenpachi way back, where there's a great visual of the old man hovering over him with like his hand on his shoulder and like guiding him through. So was he able to match Kenpachi there because he was able to tap into his Quincy powers, or were his Quincy powers still dormant at that time too? I don't know. It seems like based on some of the narration here, he was tapping into his Quincy powers, in which case that's crazy. That's a crazy bit of foreshadowing that just I didn't even notice back then, because why would I? I'm sure there are even more hints in the past. There's the whole talk about how Old Man Zangetsu said that he hates the rain and he hates Ichigo feeling sad, and a lot of this was because he was trying to help Ichigo. This Quincy side of him wasn't trying to harm Ichigo, but it was trying to keep him from going down the path of being a Soul Reaper, which is fascinating in its own right. Like, this piece of Yuabaha, I assume, has some kind of initiative of its own, as it wanted to keep Ichigo from being a Soul Reaper, because it knew that eventually, I don't know if it meant that it itself would have to kill Ichigo from the inside, or if that part of Yuabaha knew that at some point, if Ichigo became a Soul Reaper, Ichigo would come into conflict with the Quincy's and with Yuabaha himself, and that Yuabaha would have to kill him. That Old Man Zangetsu was trying to avoid that. You know, it's crazy. If this feels a little scrambled, guys, it's because I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this, and I'm just trying to kind of put the pieces together, and I'm sure the more I look into this, the more I'll uncover, but like, this is very insane. But there's this beautiful sequence after Old Man Zangetsu admits to having been restricting Ichigo's power, where he admits that the only thing he ever truly lied about was his identity, but that his intention to protect Ichigo was always truthful, and that he even eventually stopped trying to hinder Ichigo's path, and instead grew to actually see why he needed to do this, and kind of became changed from everything else within Ichigo, that this piece of Yuabaha decided to help Ichigo instead, and has seen who he's grown into, and that he's not like the other Soul Reapers. It's this really beautiful moment. Old man Zangetsu sheds a tear and steps aside and isn't trying to restrict him anymore, isn't trying to keep him back from becoming what he's meant to be. It's this really powerful sequence, and I'm not doing it justice with this description, but if you've seen it, you know what I mean. Who Ichigo is has changed his feelings on himself. Things that might have been holding him back are now helping push him forward. Everything's kind of falling into place. These parts of what's inside of him aren't his enemies, even when they seem to be. I've talked before, particularly when Ichigo became one with his sword during the fight with Aizen. Ichigo needed to accept these different parts of himself, and this just expands and fully realizes that idea. Both the Zangetsus, whether it's white or the Yuabaha part, they aren't separate things really. They are all parts of Ichigo, and now that he knows the truth about himself, he can finally see that. All of these things that he deals with in his inner mind, in his soul, are just aspects of himself, things that he inherited from his parents, a part of his physical and spiritual makeup. His Soul Reaper powers obviously come from his dad, his Quincy powers from his mom, while his Hollow abilities are a genetic condition that his mom had, but all of those things are him, even the invasive aspects of white. So not just understanding that fact, but accepting and embracing them now that he knows what they all are and where they come from. It's so important to his growth and to be his best self. It's all about internal balance within one's soul, and there's the whole thing where Misaki was able to live, she was able to love, she was able to have Ichigo because she had Isshin with her to balance her, to literally balance her with his Soul Reaper side and his humanity. And Ichigo, because he's part Isshin and part Misaki, he's capable of balancing himself out because he has these different aspects. He doesn't need someone else to be there to keep his hollow side in check. He's able to do that himself because he's a Soul Reaper and he's a Quincy and he's, all these different things that were swirling around within, but he's found the balance. I thought back to White's talk about kings and horses, about who is really in control. At the time, it seemed like White was trying to be the king and force Ichigo to be his horse, his vessel while he had the reins, but maybe he was really hinting at having his own power be restricted by the secret Quincy that was hanging out in there, Like maybe he thought, I'm being turned into the horse because the one who's restricting my powers and who's actually in charge is the old man that's pretending to be me. There's a scene where the conversation between them where White's talking about taking control and, claiming power, and I think he was really just fighting for Ichigo's own natural abilities that Yuabaha's portion was restricting. But I think that Ichigo has realized, and maybe White has too, that none of them are the horse. They are all parts of the singular king of Ichigo's mind and soul, that there's only the warrior coming to terms with every part of himself, not needing to be carried into battle, but instead running into it on his own 2 feet, without a steed, fully at peace with all aspects of who he is. And it's beautiful, as Ichigo is able to pull the swords from the forge, and it causes this massive reaction that was so crazy where the whole ocean parts, very epic. The new Bankai is reforged and fittingly made into something new and something that's very powerful symbolically. I love that the single blade has been melted down into 2 smaller but very distinct swords. Each sword is going to represent both parts of Ichigo, the power of each parent, of Soul Reapers and Quincy's, the power of both Zangetsus he's known, the power of white and black, of both halves that complete the makeup of who Ichigo is. He knows who he is, he knows what his power means, and I can't wait to see where he goes from here. It's an absolutely beautiful moment that wouldn't have been possible without our main character fully coming to terms with his past and who he is. It really feels like the culmination of so much as Ichigo understands finally that it's all him. Whatever circumstances made it happen, he's the one that has to be at balance. He can't ask Old Man Zangetsu for help, and there's no need to summon his hollow mask anymore. All of that is unnecessary to someone that has complete control of his own spirit, of his own power. There's no confusion anymore. Ichigo Kurosaki knows who he really is, and I hope his inner world is sunnier than it has ever been. and there isn't a drop of rain. So with these chapters and this episode, this is where Core 1 of the Thousand Year Blood War ends. So it was where the anime apparently took a break for a while, like a season finale kind of. But we're gonna keep on trucking through and continue. I'm not gonna go on like a months long break. I have asked my patrons for questions specifically relating to Core 1, so I'll be posting my responses to those questions here on YouTube soon as well. That's all gonna be specific Core 1 related questions, but this is kind of a milestone within the Thousand Year Blood War. It's kind of like a checkpoint, and it felt like a very good checkpoint considering Ichigo's development here at the end is very exciting and feels like we're one step closer to whatever the end game for all of this is. So thanks so much for watching, guys. As always, please comment, like, subscribe. If you want to see more of my thoughts on this, my initial reactions, you can go to my Patreon. You can join there. Really appreciate it. Yeah, didn't see it coming, but it is what it is, and I loved it. Hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye.